okay, am I jealous of a dog?
I want to say a Blanche.
And they want to sit here and have this back and forth detailed discussion about how to like cook a fucking pot roast.
Have you seen the movie The Bitch with Joan Collins?
I was like, what were you wearing? And she's like, you know. I said, okay.
Are you doing okay?
We
What's
good?
on your mind?
What's
what are you
happening?
thinking about?
Are you all right?
He's like,
Is it good now?
nothing.
Is it good
I'm
now?
like, you're thinking about something. Everyone's thinking about something at some point.
This episode of Primary Care is sponsored by Rugiette Health, more than just an ED treatment.
So I'm Adam Maurer. I'm a straight-friendly therapist here in Austin, Texas. And I've been in practice now for a decade, which is wild because I know I don't look that old. Thank you.
So what are some other things that queer men specifically, maybe we'll focus on men at this point,
Yes.
male presenting,
What's up, dudes?
that come to you and say, I need help with this? What are some other common things you see?
So because we teach men to be hyper-independent, there is a lot of counter-dependence in their relationships. So when you learn to do everything on your own and everything's about you, if you get in a relationship and try to make it work, it can be like, fuck, we are both used to just doing our own thing,
Yeah.
and now we don't know how to like
Sure.
negotiate this moment.
Yes, absolutely. I see that a lot with people I've dated in the past, especially I have dated other doctors, and two doctors can be quite a difficult.
Yep. Yep. I can see that.
Yeah.
Two therapists, I would be like, no, thank
Yeah,
you.
right. It's just it's difficult. And so it's great that they can even come to that
Yeah.
idea, because I feel like it took me a few times to realize, hey, maybe we're both like something's wrong here. Maybe we're both trying to be too me. That's why I stopped dating doctors. But how do they navigate that issue?
Yeah. So sometimes then it is being like, cool, what would it be like to have a night that's about you?
Right.
What feels like important to who you are? So I studied the Gottman model of relationship work. And in that, they talk about having what's called a State of the Union address. So like once a week, you kind of get together and you're like, cool, who are you? What's going on? How do I support you?
Right.
And just keeping that mindfulness going makes it harder than to just be in your own world. So there's a lot of times where people are living in proximity, but not having attunement.
Yeah.
So like, cool, we coexist in the same space, but what is it like to turn towards each other and share what's up?
Yeah.
And what makes it particularly hard for queer men is in a lot of our family systems, to do that meant you got maybe, cut off from your family system.
Yep.
And so the idea of having someone that close to you, see who you are, see you struggle, see you have desires, it could feel scary. So it's just easier just to be hyper independent and do things yourself.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. One of the interesting things that brought my partner and I close together, and I don't think this is for everybody. I don't think that using recreational substances is great in all capacities, but we both would smoke weed or use edibles or THC products. And it just allowed for us to like close the chapter of the day ahead and just kind of focus on the moment and just be like, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
What's going on with you at this moment? Because sometimes our brains, especially after a long, busy day, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, it's just hard to even get to that center for yourself. Like, what's going on with me? Not talking, can't even talk to you yet, because I'm like still trying to get past the day, see if I'm okay. And then to get that level of clarity by the end of the day can be difficult. And so for us, it's become a regular habit, but it really helps us to make sure we're checking in, because we can really take that moment to focus on each other and enjoy each other.
Yeah. I think of it in terms of responsible hedonism. So
I love that.
Right. People move towards pleasure away from pain, unless pleasure or pain is their pleasure.
Yeah.
So in that, then it's like, cool, drugs, alcohol, these things aren't inherently just bad.
Right.
It's our relationship with them. So if you have an intentional relationship, it can be dope as fuck.
Exactly.
I think it is harder to do that with some drugs, right? I don't know people who have a casual relationship with meth.
They've
Not
tried,
yet.
I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, that's probably not one to sign up for.
No, but I also see in therapy world, we're just catching up now on the use of drugs in psychotherapy.
Yes.
So like the research is finally like coming together. We had to push through a lot of like Nancy Reagan, just say no shit.
Can you believe? Why do they like the Reagans so much? Why is this such a thing? I can't find any literature on anything they did well for the country. Do you have any just off the topic?
I mean, they let a lot of our people die.
Right. That's all I can think
To
about.
them at the time.
I mean, yeah, man, the 70s were so great. I'm learning a lot about disco right now. I'm really in a disco vibe.
Uh-huh.
Do you know much about disco or the 70s?
Okay, again, it feels like a
I
read.
don't know.
Dr.
I'm sorry. I don't
Tyler.
know. I don't know what
I'm
people
41.
know. Yeah, well, see, I didn't know that. Well, either way.
And I'm just giving you a hard time. No, I know a lot about.
Yeah,
70s,
I'm just learning because I feel like it's been brought to my attention in a weird way. Not that someone's like actually said it to me, but I'm starting to realize as I'm getting older that there's not a lot of queer people that are maybe like 30 years older than me that are out there thriving who could have been great representation for me. And that's because they all died.
Yeah.
And why did they die? Well, HIV, and when did that happen? And what was happening at that time? And then I started diving deep into LGBTQ plus rights in the 70s and how we were actually making a lot of progress at that time with disco being super important in that process with music and making it mainstream and queer culture becoming mainstream. And then we had, unfortunately, the end of disco / HIV crisis, which just threw us back like to where we're at now.
Yeah. And it's wild now to have like queer elders.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's not very common, and I'll be honest, the majority of the 60 to 70-year-old gay males that I've met were closeted until very recently. So it's almost like our generation has missed seeing the 20-year-old plus of us thrive in the world and society and how we could have, been. I actually, one of the few places, there are a couple places I go where I see a larger, older population is Palm Springs and Wilton Manor. So Florida and California. We were in Palm Springs in May, and we went to a few restaurants, and I would see like a big groups of like older gay men that were like together, and I'm like, I never see them hanging out, and like this is what I want for myself, like Golden Girl vibes. I already watched the show constantly, but I wanted like a male representation of that, and to be able to see it, it's very rare and it's sad.
Yeah. Are you a Sophia? Sorry. Which game girl are you?
I would probably say that I am. I want to say a Blanche. But that's my inner me.
Yes.
I feel like that's like the one who is not actually like physically living, just like the inside of me. But I think Sophia's is great. I love all of them. I think there's little pieces of me everywhere.
Yes.
In the Golden Girls.
They have a great episode where
I love Rose. Go ahead.
where Blanche tries to date her like insignificant other. So there's this guy, Mel Bushman.
Yes, Mel Bushman.
Yeah,
She sees like part-time, and then he almost dies.
Yeah. Or he's on vacation.
Right, she thought he was dead.
So she's like, I'm going to make this relationship work. And it
Yes,
doesn't. And I was like, they go back to just being casual friends and that hook up every now and then. And I was like, that was so progressive for that time.
Yes, there's a lot of progressive, especially for women, sexual relationships that she goes through and gets torn apart by her friends. But I love it the whole way.
I have a signed picture of Rue that she did. It's to someone named Dick, and it says "To Dick, love Rue," and I was
It's
like,
worth
"Oh,
it.
perfect."
I have one of those. It works for me.
It's great.
I love Rose too. I feel like a lot of her characteristics are like me, maybe, growing up, much more naive. And so I see a lot of myself there as well.
A sweetness.
Yeah, I try. I try.
I can see it.
But yeah, I think that just kind of backing up to, by the way, disco is great. Everyone should check out. And Michael Jackson's disco album is top notch. It's probably my favorite Michael Jackson. And have you seen the movie The Wiz?
I have seen The Wiz, yeah.
Incredible. I had just seen it. Diana Ross is in it.
Yeah.
Insane.
These
things should be taught in school.
I've been queer for a long time. I can't tell you how many times I dated someone who's younger than me, and I'm like, okay.
All right, let's take out the books.
We're taking all the movies, baby.
Have you seen the movie The Bitch with Joan Collins?
I have not seen The Bitch.
It's considered one of the worst movies in the 70s of all time.
There's
a lot of eroticism.
Yes.
She is a very sex positive role. It's all about her, and she's a lot of sex, and there's a lot of sex scenes. It seems like it might be a porn when you're watching it, because you're like, wow, was in a movie theater?
Yeah.
Which is actually really interesting how sex was portrayed in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then into the 80s, how it all shifted. And I mean, looking at even the fashion and the style of the 70s being very feminine and flamboyant and accepting of all cultures, and then to the hyper masculinity that we see in the 80s and the rock and roll and the death of disco. It's such an interesting sort of dynamic between those two decades and the policies politically, and I can go on and on, but that's not what we're here to talk about today.
But I get it. I mean, things tend to shift. Like there's like a shift and then pushback.
Yeah, and I feel like we're doing that now. We're having this shift, pushback, shift.
Yeah, my hope is that we push some of this stuff out the window because it is exhausting.
It is exhausting, but I think that's their goal, is to exhaust us. But I think some of the stuff that's happening now, I mean, there's just really no platform for the conservative party at this point. I mean, it's drag queens and trans rights and women's rights and any other minority they can cling to.
Yeah.
They're running out of minorities.
They'll come back around to gay again. They'll get us.
Oh yeah, they're always on our ass for sure.
I remember, like, so I had to get, when I got married to my partner, we had to get married in a different state because we couldn't get married in Texas. And it was just so wild to me though, because it was like the messaging being, I can't have sex because I'm gay. Right. So it's not real sex.
Right.
But also at the same time, I'm a sexual deviant. And I'm like, y'all need to get together on your messaging because this shit is all over the place.
Yeah, that's the problem. There's a lot of messaging and a lot of noise and a lot of confusion, which is really the point, is to confuse everyone.
Well, and it's wild to me how, like, every major organization would say trans people need to exist. Here's what gender-affirming care looks like for them.
Yes.
Right? Queer people, gay people exist. This is not something to change.
Right.
And the idea that, like, you can just keep barking the same thing and hope that, like, people buy into what you're selling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, like, even with all this, like, stacked up against it.
You know, I feel like a big group of people that are still voting conservative against their own best interests, it's kind of like I almost look at it like a sports team or like their race as well. Race is something you can cling on to and ride the wave, right? Especially if you're white, you know, or especially if you're male, especially if you're conservative. There's really not a lot you have to lose, especially if you're older, right?
Yeah.
I think of older women who may be not so concerned about abortion rights because that's past their time. And so they just think, this doesn't affect me. I know it's still safe for me to cling on to what I'm used to, so that's where I'm going to stay.
And I think this is some of the sexism in that. I think some of those women are married to men that they're just like, right, if I go against what the head of the household says, that's going to just create disruption. So you either have to do that in secret,
and there's a lot of I think I definitely don't want to speak for any women out there. I can speak for gay men who I think
I'll speak for you women. Let's go.
There you go. I think there's a lot of jealousy there. You know, there's a lot of I'm suffering, so you should have to as well. I didn't get that chance, so why should you? I'm in an unhappy marriage.
Yeah.
That's what you get as well.
Yeah. The cruelty is wild to me that we have as people. This idea, this is how I think of it, is that so many people have unresolved hurt.
Yes.
And they feel like if they give up that hurt, then they are giving up their experience of it.
Right.
So rather than saying, oh, I think student loans is shit and I had to pay mine, we need doctors and lawyers and shit in society to function. So I get it. They go, no, I was hurt by this, and you're gonna feel it too. You're gonna feel this pain too.
What is that?
It's the fear that, like, if I move on, then my experience is gonna be
diminished.
Or not. Yeah.
Right. Instead of, like, being happy for other people to not have to deal with your negative experience, which is really interesting because if we have children, that's what we want for our children. But why not want that for your community?
Yeah.
But I think that is very American. Nuclear family. It's all about the nuclear family again. I think that was 60s. The nuclear family really took off.
When we came back from war, we had, like, the 50s and all this, like, suburb shit.
Yes.
And pushing all that. And part of the reason that all works, you're gonna love this, it comes back to white supremacy.
Of course, everything leads back to there.
So when you have, like, community as your little nuclear family,
right,
then men get to be in charge of that.
Right.
And within that, then they can feel a sense of power and, like, be in control. And at the same time, if you are fragmented from other people, so let's say, like, people of color, you don't have to hear or deal with what's going on for them.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of people I know who have, who would say they have, like, friends of color. And I'm like, oh, do they talk to you about, like, their experiences of racism?
Right.
And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, you have acquaintances of color.
Right.
Friend,
for sure.
Because you're not safe enough to talk about that stuff with.
Right.
So there was this push to essentially isolate people, because then capitalism makes money off of it, right?
Sure.
So if everyone has their own home rather than a whole family system living
together, that's really not allowed. That can't have that.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that really has benefited the patriarchal capitalist society that we live in. And like you mentioned, it makes us focus on just a small group of people that we can control. So the head of household is feeling dominant. They're in control of their little vibe, because in reality, the reality is no one's in control of anything.
Yeah. We are on a rock that's rotating around a gas of one galaxy of endless.
Right.
I can't control shit.
Yeah. So giving you that small piece of power, which is what I think the whole, point of racism is, right? Is if you have poor people and they are miserable, and you tell them that they're better than another group of people, that's enough to keep them satisfied, that, they're still above at some capacity, regardless of how much money they have or what happens to them. They're still going to be better than a woman or better than a minority group. And that's hard to let go of when you don't have a lot of else to be happy with.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we come back to the shame-based religion and like queer people being the menace, trans people specifically.
Right.
Because then in that model, right, I can have an affair, but like, that's nothing, because I'm not actively sinning against God. Like these people over here every day.
Every day.
I've gotten right with God.
I only did it once this week.
Yeah. And you were out there actively sinning all the time. So I get to feel okay.
Yeah.
It's fucked up.
It is. But, I think the whole big part of something that is so new about all this is that more people hopefully are talking about it, or at least listening to these ideas. And, I hate being the white guy who's bringing up white supremacy and the patriarchy and all these things that really I sort of represent. But at the same time, I feel like we as white males do have a responsibility to be the ones that say, hey, this doesn't work for us either. Listen around. You could be living better.
Yeah.
You could be doing better. If we get rid of maybe racism, maybe we'll also re-examine capitalism. And yes, socialism is not going to be the answer, but it's not a two option state. We can come up with a different system that benefits everybody, but I think a lot of it too is just making everybody confused and yelling at each other and trying to navigate through these very simple ideas of just let people live and enjoy their life and give them the pursuit or opportunity to have the pursuit of happiness in some capacity. And if we could just all get on board that everybody deserves that right, we would see that there's a lot of things in the system that don't allow it to happen.
Yeah.
And then that would be a problem for the system. Hey folks, my podcast Primary Care is sponsored by Rougiette Ready, the latest pharmaceutical advancement in erectile dysfunction. This is a sublingual compounded treatment using 3 ingredients, sildenafil, tadalafil, and apomorphine, and it works up to 5 times faster than pills and chewables. We give you a promo code Primary Care for 20% off your first order and free shipping. Now, let's get back to the content.
And I do a lot of work with couples that have like mixed privilege. And so
that's interesting.
It's wild. I love it.
That's cool.
The base is to teach people privilege. Like, here's what's up. Like, right. One, you didn't ask for it, you were just born into this.
Sure.
But with that, right, you have a responsibility now that you're like connected to people, and to be aware of like, you're not going to get it all the time. Sometimes you're going to flub. Yep. And if you can just embody that, own that, like, I'll get it as much as I can get it. People who are marginalized will be like, that's dope. That's what I need. Is you to like
try.
Yeah. Like not just sit here.
Yeah.
And then, as gay people, we know what it's like to have people be like, well, how do we fix what's going on for you? And it's like, we didn't create this mess. We just love dick and cock. Like that is just it. Y'all fix it.
Right.
And so I think that is the same kind of vibe that goes into other ways of privilege, thinking of like racism, to be like, okay, y'all tell us what to do. And man, unless you're paying people of color, don't be asking them.
Exactly. This is our problem that we created, so we need to find a way to fix it for everybody. And it's interesting. What are some of if things come up to the top of your head that you see in that sort of a dynamic of a relationship where there is a
mixed privilege?
Yeah, privileges.
Yeah. So sometimes that can come out sideways in ways that like you're not aware. So I think about men and women. I have seen where someone like felt really hurt by their partner because they didn't want to walk with them to a restaurant. And I said, okay, well, let me just check something here, because this bitch is always coming in, done to the nines, high heels.
Right.
She's like a trophy, like, for this guy.
Sure.
I was like, what were you wearing? And she's like, I said, okay. And how far was the walk?
Right.
Oh, that many blocks. And it was raining. And you like got ready before this person's like event. So you're kind of going to show support. So, but for him, right, he felt lonely and isolated. Like, she doesn't think about me. She's this princess. She just wants to get out not realizing all the things that she did.
Right. Or why not just have the conversation right there and say, hey, can we let's take a time out and figure out where we're missing the cues here.
Because Dr. Tyler, that takes vulnerability.
Yes, it does.
And emotional intelligence and communication skills.
Yep.
3 things we don't teach men to have.
Yep. It's funny. My partner and I don't like to argue.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a household where there was a lot of arguing. It was a lot of time wasted where if we're going to be in the same space, let's just make it good or just read or do something where there's not negativity. Because I grew up in a really negative space as a child. And so my partner and I, we still bicker about silly things, but I've gotten to this new place where if we're arguing about something silly, I'm like, let's just time out and talk about this later because this is really not even worth us shifting our perspective. I think yesterday I have a thing where like if my clothes are ripped or something, like I just don't want to wear them anymore, which is really irresponsible and not great, but I donate them and someone will. And my partner's like, you should not throw away that shirt. This is a fine shirt. And I'm like, I bought this shirt. I worked hard for it. If I want to donate it, it's in my head. I didn't say any of that, but that's the process I'm having. And I'm like, hey, time out. We're having a great day. Let's not argue about this shirt. Let's just put it over here. We'll talk about it later. And I've already forgot. It's probably hanging up in my closet.
Well, when I teach folks, it's never about the pot roast, right?
Yes.
I'm expensive, Dr. Tyler. I'm $200 a session. And so people come in and they want to sit here and have this back and forth detailed discussion about how to like cook a fucking pot roast. And I had to be like, y'all, what is this really about?
Right.
Because this is not it.
Yes.
And really underneath of it, it's like, oh, is my understanding of the world, is it being valued? Sometimes we hang things that feel too kind of maybe prickly, spicy, too scary to hold on things that feel easier.
Yeah.
So one time my husband was watching a dog from a partnership he had in the past, and he was giving this dog all sorts of affection. And he's like a kind of a cactus person. Like he is not an affectionate person.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay. Am I jealous of a dog in this moment? Oh shit. That's humiliating, right? Loving people is humiliating. Like
It
this.
is. Yes.
And I had to say, okay, Adam, you can just bury this within you. But what's probably going to happen is the millisecond he does something that feels safer to be upset about, you're going to bring a thunder that he is not ready for.
Right.
Or you can just own it with him, right? So I was like, bruh, I am low-key jealous of a dog. He's like, you are crazy. I was like, I know you love a crazy person. It's fine. And once we started unpacking it, we got to talk about the longing. So underneath our complaints, like those are just longing in disguise.
Right.
So getting good at being like, oh, I'm just longing for feeling more affection.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I want you to feel good and all that. And it led to there being meaningful change.
Yeah.
But that is like, hard to do, especially in the moment. If you're on the go, if you're used to, getting back to like 2 gay men together, if you're used to things being for you and about you,
for sure,
in that moment to be like, fuck, this is bigger than me and you. This is like some unfinished business with other people, places, and things.
I think that's a really good tool to keep in your back pocket to remember, like these little things that do bother us. We're so quick to push them aside, especially the small things, which is great. You know, you have to get through your day, but remembering that it is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It never goes anywhere. Everything that bothers you, especially about your partner who you're living with or spending a lot of time with, it's going to be in your back pocket until you're ready to pull it out. And oftentimes you're ready to pull it out at the worst possible moment.
Ooh, yeah. People ask me like, when do you have the conversation? I'm like, there's never a good time.
Right.
Right. Because if it's bad, trying to have the conversation is going to be hard.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling good, you're going to worry that you're going to disrupt the harmony.
Exactly.
So you just got to get good at like putting it in perspective. So 1, I talk about like, oh, on a scale of like 1 to 10, this is like a 1.
Yeah. That's
so
good.
then it's easier because not all of you feels like I'm coming at you.
Exactly.
And then with feelings, putting feelings in like a pie chart almost. So I'm like, 30% mad with you.
Right.
So now you know what kind of way to engage with me.
Exactly.
Because if I'm 80% mad at you, that's going to be real different than 30%.
Right. And so do you have a strategy when you are like ready to talk about these serious things with your partner, or how you tell people? Or do you just kind of, I guess just when the moment's right, you just say kind of like what you kind of just explained is a great strategy.
I think of it as like knowing the person that you want to communicate to.
Right.
So how do y'all work best? How does your system work? So sometimes that's text, which is okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes people feel silly about that, but I'm like, look, if you can
writing a letter.
Yeah. If you love someone who is more autonomously attached, they're kind of like more in their world, communicating feels challenging to them, feels foreign to them.
Yep.
And then you're like, okay, let's sit down and talk about feelings. They're gonna be like, the fuck is this?
Yeah.
That's like asking me to do algebra, right? So instead, being like, cool, if you need some space, I'll just shoot you a text and try to be kind and considerate as I write to you.
Yeah.
Some people, it just gets like as easy as, can we be chill? Right? So I think of it as like little kids can't self-regulate. They need a caregiver.
Yeah.
So when you're teaching kids how to be independent, if they get activated, yo, can you be chill? Or do we need to, like, do you need help?
Yeah.
So if you can be chill, right? My little nephew's like, I want to be chill, but I can't be chill. And so whatever's going on, like the system will stop and help take care of that group member.
Yeah.
And then other times you might be like, I can be chill. Okay. I'm just activated a little bit, but I'll be chill. And it's like, cool. So in relationships, yo, can you be chill? Is this something you be chill on or not?
Right.
Maybe you're just having a rough day. Maybe you're just hungry. Who knows?
So just basically checking in with the person to see if it's a good time.
Yeah.
And a good thing to talk about in that dialogue, in that moment.
And typically in main squeeze situations, people pick a partner that complements them.
Right.
So there's usually going to be someone who's like, let's talk about feelings. And someone's like, oh, God, why?
Yeah, that's definitely my partner and I. He's more like, he wants to digest the anger and digest the feelings and talk about it later. And I'm like, we got to talk about it right now because I can't move on from this moment. And I'm trying to be more like him because he's actually folded way more than me to like appease my ability. Because I'm always just trying to save time. I'm like, look, I don't want to spend 10 more minutes angry at each other. It's sunny outside or the movie is on and I want to cuddle and I want to be happy with rainbows and butterflies. So can we just get over this? And he's like, I want to process these feelings, which is perfectly great too.
Yeah. Dr. Tyler, you and I might be more similar in a way.
Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I have a hard time if people are dysregulated and I'm attached to that. Like I feel uneasy.
Yes, me too.
Right?
For
So
sure. I think it's empathetic. I think you're an empathetic person too,
Yeah.
and it's good because we can ride people's emotions on a good, and we can ride them.
It's tough when it goes bad. I think of it in terms of relational attachment. So like we learn to feel safe by helping manage people.
Yep.
And making sure everyone feels good.
Yep.
And as we have more and more secure attachment in our deepest relationships, it can be really easy to be like, oh, you feel spicy and I want you to feel okay because I don't want you to feel the spiciness towards me.
Yeah, it's true.
Because I want to feel safe.
Yeah, and it actually took years before I would stop asking my partner Gabriel, "Are you doing okay?
We
What's
good?
on your mind?
What's
what are you thinking
happening?
about?
Are you all right?
He's like,
Is it
nothing.
Is it good
I'm
now?
like, you're thinking about something. Everyone's thinking about something at some point. You're not. There's nothing you're not thinking about. He's like, I'm fine. And it took me many years because I grew up in a situation where my representation of a relationship, they weren't fine and they never talked about it. So I always needed to double check who I was with.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting for both of us. It's exhausting for them too because they're like, I'm fine, literally. I just thinking about the road or whatever. I'm not thinking about. And so learning that has been an interesting change for me in the last probably 6 months. I've made an active choice to just be like, everything's fine.
We
buddy.
good.
You're good.
Yeah.
Just rub the knee. It's all fine. You're
Yeah.
good.
Scale of 1 to 10, how good we? Okay, we at an 8.
Yes,
Great.
exactly.
Then I can like relax.
Yes.
And what's tough in those situations is those people typically like space
Yes,
to
I know.
internally process. And you're like,
Here I am.
what can I do to be safe?
Exactly. Well, thank you so much again. I
Yes.
can't wait to have you back.
Thank you for having
And
me.
Of course. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for next time.
Let's keep it real.
Add us on Instagram at Primary Care Pod. Catch up on past episodes and don't miss out on new ones. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify at Primary Care Pod.